coming to you live from my basement home office here in Boise, Idaho. And I'm excited to be here and back with the Andrus Center for Public Policy for this amazing conference. I presented a skill builder back in 2019 before the world changed, and I'm excited to do it virtually for you today and then tomorrow with another skill builder about how to run for office. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump in here. How many of you, I don't know if you can tell me in the chat, have seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Well, those of you who are maybe part of Gen Z, maybe don't know what I'm talking about, but it's a great movie. And when he lacks engagement in the classroom, people say, Bueller, Bueller. Anyway, that was kind of my joke here. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I want to ask you a couple of questions. The first being how comfy you are already with PR. So if you put 10 in the chat, that means you could teach this workshop and I can just like go to the next room and take a nap. Or if you are a 1, that means you are somebody who like breaks out in hives at the thought of being interviewed on TV or having a reporter call you or being mentioned on Twitter. Oh my God, scary. So that's my first question. Let us know. And Jake, feel free to jump in and tell me kind of how the responses are trending. And the second question is, how many of you work in marketing or PR? Looks like we're getting a lot of responses here, both in the chat, and I don't see anything in the poll on my end, but I appreciate you putting it in the chat. Okay. All right. It states no polls yet. The same for me, Jake, but that's okay. You all are using the chat, and I feel like that's sufficient. So it's good to know kind of what the comfort level is with this group as we dive in. But I hope whether you are a seasoned pro or a total newbie, or whether you work in marketing, maybe not PR specifically, that you'll have some juicy takeaways from our time together today. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. So who am I? I founded a company called Full Swing Public Relations back in 2019, which was a very interesting time and place to start a company in retrospect. That said, I've managed to grow the team from just me in 2019 to a team of 6. We've got 2 people in Seattle, 1 in New York, 1 in Philadelphia, and another one besides me here in Boise. I am a 4th generation Idahoan. I lived in Missoula, Montana for 11 years and was elected to the city council there at age 28. I was the first openly LGBTQ person elected and thought I would make Missoula my home, but ended up having a baby and the grandmas live here. And so it was important to raise my kid back in Idaho, and it's good to be back. It's a nice place, especially in the fall. Oh my gosh, go outside if you are in Boise today. It is gorgeous. I really like to ski, hang out with my son who just turned 5, and I'm kind of bad at golf, but I still enjoy it. And the name of my company is a nod to the game of golf, which is a great game and can teach you a lot, even if you're bad at it. So my company's mission is to help women leaders be seen and sought after in order to earn game-changing wealth online and leave a positive legacy in the world. And that's important to me because I feel like as women, so often we struggle to be seen in our lives, both professionally and personally. And I think it's so important to me to make sure that my clients feel seen by me and by my team. And also that I have created a space, a work life and a career where I feel like I can be seen authentically. So that's a little bit about why our mission is the way that it is. It's so much fun to work with women leaders almost exclusively all around the country and help them raise their visibility, raise their platform so that they can earn the kind of money, access the kind of power, and make the kind of change that will really change the world. So many of you probably know what it's like to work at an agency. Some of you might not, though, especially if you don't come from a marketing or PR background. So this is just a little case study of one of our previous clients, My Village, which is out of Bozeman, Montana, a venture-backed social impact company that helps women start home-based childcare programs that are of high quality and actually has created a coaching community to help raise the level of quality among early childhood educators in their community. And I think this is a good example of the kind of fun stuff that we get to do, because in the midst of lockdowns in March 2020, my village was really had a difficult choice to make. Were we going to embrace this opportunity and tell our story, as it became very clear that childcare was going to be potentially a casualty of COVID-19 and certainly was going to look quite a bit different in the coming year plus ahead. And we were able to position them as a great solution that was really more COVID proof than a lot of the childcare centers at the time, and land them in some of these publications. So it's really rewarding to help women founders and women leaders tell their story on the national stage. And that's what I love about my job. So my approach to PR is really rooted in three things: helping women leaders get noticed, helping women-led companies and organizations figure out how to be the news, because really it's not enough anymore, if you haven't noticed, to just put out a press release and hope they come to you. It's really important to figure out how you can actually create the vehicles that are considered newsworthy for writers, journalists, editors to consider covering. Thought leadership is also so important when it comes to figuring out how to be the news. So newsrooms, online news outlets, blogs, everyone is hungry to kind of feed the beast when it comes to creating content. And by positioning yourself as a thought leader and really putting yourself out there with your writing, you can make a big impact for your business, your company, and ultimately whatever change you want to make in the world. And on that note, living your legacy is what I'm all about. So I think it's important to help women leaders define the change that we want to make in the world. Is that through a book? Is it through a piece of art? Is it through our business? Is it through our family? What does that look like? And how do you wield the biggest influence possible? And what does that look like for you? Part of the reason I'm really passionate about working with women leaders and helping them build wealth and build power and influence is because when you look at the number of women who start businesses, it's very high, especially among BIPOC women, which is so cool to see. However, it seems like we hit a glass ceiling, just like we do in so many other areas of corporate America, in that only 2% of women-owned businesses ever hit 7 figures. And that's why it's so important to me to help women create the kind of brand awareness, personal brand awareness, in order to be able to scale their businesses, sell the books, launch the thing, whatever the thing might be, in order to really command that power and have that level of influence in the world. So what is PR anyway? I feel like PR is kind of one of those terms that people are like, well, I know it when I see it. Like, I'm so bad at PR. How do you do PR? I feel like I'm doing PR right now, but what does that really mean? And, you know, sometimes people use PR and publicists interchangeably, but they're really quite different. So, for example, publicity or publicist is really focused on generating media awareness, right? Getting you in the news. And that is absolutely something that I do and that my team does. But we are ultimately a PR firm. And so it's bigger than that. It's about building trust. It's about maintaining and advancing your reputation among the people that buy from you, who donate to you, who have an influence or a stake in your business. And ultimately, public relations focuses on earned media and not paid media so much. So that's an important distinction there. The other thing I always talk to women leaders who work with me about is their personal brand, especially if you are a BIPOC leader, if you are part of the LGBTQ+ community. Your personal brand is likely going to be connected to your business brand, whether you like it or not. You can't really extract the two, especially these days where everything is pretty knowable about people ultimately. So as I work with women to help them develop their personal brands, I always ask them to think about, what do people say about you when you're not around? How are you consistently showing up as an expert and building that credibility and that influence? And that's so important, because if you've ever researched how newsroom decisions are made or who's quoted in the news over time, all of the research shows that women are far less likely to show up as subject matter experts, to be quoted in the press. And part of that is because women are often not the decision makers in the newsroom. There might be a lot more female journalists than there used to be, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're in those managing editor or publisher positions where they can actually influence coverage. So it's important to know that, I think, as a PR firm that's trying to help women leaders, because it's all the more reason that you need to be showing up consistently and credibly. It's also important to just understand that relationship between your personal brand and that alignment with your company and vice versa. So what is it that you value and how are you living those values? And how is that showing up in your company, or maybe not? Those are important distinctions to get really clear on, I think, if you're considering writing a book, or if you're considering trying to sell yourself as a public speaker, or build your social media following, these types of things in order to increase your impact to do good in the world. So handout time. This is kind of like my little hammer time, handout time. I love a GIF. I was so glad to learn right before this started that if you click on the lightning bolt in the chat, you can actually share GIFs, which is so much fun. So I'm going to pause this and go over to this personal branding handout, which you all should have access to. And maybe Jake, if you want to interject exactly how they access that, you can tell me. But I'm just going to share my screen. You should be able to see this, and you all should have the ability to access this, to do this on your own time. But I think this is so important because I really want to help women leaders own their brand. When I first started my business back in 2019, I actually was fortunate enough to work with Stacey Ennis, who presented this morning and is an awesome woman that you should totally follow and get to know. And some of this came from my work with her, and I've just iterated on it over time and used it to help clients, and I hope that it will help you. So I hope you'll take a moment now to fill out some of these questions, thinking about what your core values are, what are the 2 to 3 themes that come from that list of values that resonate with you, and list them here. So feel free to jump in, Jake, and tell them how they can access that if they don't already know. And if they can't for some reason, I can always chat this link and they can get it and make a copy of it.
I posted it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So you'll want to make a copy of it in order to make it your own, so that you're not typing on my Google Doc. Yeah?
Yeah, I did send it. I sent it as a PDF.
As a PDF. Perfect. Okay. So I think that these are really helpful prompts and questions because often as women, I think it can be kind of tough to brag about ourselves and to sometimes thinking about how others see us or how our mom or best friend or sister might view us can be helpful as we think about those personal brand values. So hopefully you have a chance to look at that and you can sit with it, think more about it, and it will be a helpful resource as you continue to develop your skills in this area on your own. The other really helpful kind of framework that I like to have clients think about. Unfortunately, I did not make this one up either, but I find it very valuable. It's from the book Story Brand by Donald Miller, who is a great guru on telling brand stories. And I wanted to just kind of walk you through this because I think it can be so helpful in positioning your brand or your services as really helping folks who are part of your target audience. So if you look at this map, you have a character, right? So this is a member of the group that you need to reach, either personally because you're selling books or you want to get in front of this audience as a keynote speaker, or because your business relies on them for customers or clients. Chances are this character has a problem, right? And that's why they are looking for someone like you or someone like your business, an entity like your business, to help solve their problem. So it's really important that you position yourself as a guide who understands their fears, right? And not only their fears, but also their desires, their hopes, their beliefs. What is it about you that makes you a perfect match to help assuage their fears and help them live out their best life, right? And that leads you to your offer. What are your services? What is your offer? How does your company work? What is your product? Maybe it's an e-course, maybe it's a membership, an online membership. We work with a lot of women who have developed those and are trying to scale them online. What is it about the plan that you provide for them that is going to call them to action and help them master their fears and live their best life? What is going to make their life different? What is the transformation that is going to happen as a result of this plan? So what is that call to action? Is it to sign up for your one-on-one service offering? Is it to join your membership? Is it to download a lead magnet? A lead magnet is just kind of a fancy way of referring to a free piece of content. You've seen them, I'm sure, on websites where it's like the top 5 ways to win at Twitter engagement this month. I don't know, something like that, where you give up your email address and download a free piece of copy. And then that results in either comedy or tragedy. So like every good story, there's either a happy ending or a sad ending. And hopefully it's a happy ending, right? Because they chose to work with you and they got answers to their questions and solved their problem and their business is going from 0 to 60, and that's great. Or if they choose not to work with you, what that might mean as well in terms of staying mired in the status quo or stagnating or whatever that might look like. So I hope as you do the exercise, the worksheet on your personal brand, that you can also start to look at it through this framework of who are you trying to reach with your key message and your key product and who you are and what your unique solution is in the world, and how are you going to transform them? I think one of the mistakes I often see marketers make and folks trying to sell something make is that they make it all about them when really it should be all about the customer or the client. So let's talk a little bit more about public relations. We're also going to cover how to pitch effectively, which and that will be a little moment for you all to share some of your wins or your struggles, and we can have a bit of a conversation here as well. So Bill Gates, I'm more of a fan of Melinda, no shocker there, I'm sure, but Bill Gates is pretty credible, I would say, when it comes to how to spend money and grow businesses. And he's a big fan of PR, which I appreciate. So part of the reason PR is effective and has 2 times the trust of paid ads is because it's not paid, right? It's something that you have to earn. It's someone else telling a story, like it's a reporter telling a story. It's a third-party news site that's covering your business. So it's different and feels perhaps more honest than a paid advertisement where the person advertising the product thinks it's great, and the conversion rates bear that out. And this is really important because you want to show up with PR in front of the publications and the media outlets that matter to your target audience. So, for example, if you are a CPA and you have an e-course, right, that's all about helping other accountants transition away from the typical kind of tax return, grind it out practice and moving more toward a client advisory services type of model where you can actually charge a premium and deliver value-based billing and that sort of thing for your clientele, you would definitely want to make sure that you are showing up in the relevant trade publications that reach other CPAs, right? And those types of news outlets that they might be looking to for continuing education or building their own expertise. That is going to be probably far more effective for a client like that than even getting in the New York Times. Like everyone wants to be in the New York Times. I get that. It's really fun. It's awesome when you get a client in the New York Times. However, in terms of moving the needle on bottom line sales, which is what helps you really earn the wealth that you need to make an impact on your industry and live your best life, sometimes it's really important to think about what your audience needs versus what you want. So I hope that you'll share either in the chat or we can, Jake can help me make sure that your screen can come up here so that you can talk with us. I would love to know a little bit more about, if those of you that own your own business, what makes your business unique? What do you stand for? What does your business stand for? How are those 2 things aligned? What problem are you helping solve? And we can talk a little bit more about your experience sharing your business with the world. Anyone want to share?
Yeah.
Yay! Hello, brave soul.
Hello.
Talk to me. What is why are you trying to build your personal brand? Why does that matter to you?
Because I'm running for a local office outside of my...
Oh my gosh, you're my person. I hope we're going to hang out tomorrow too. What office are you running for?
It's a city council office.
Where? In Boise?
In Caldwell.
In Caldwell. Awesome. I went to the College of Idaho. Go you.
Oh, yes. It's a great school.
Yes. That's awesome. Good for you for running.
No,
so what do you do for work?
I work at Idaho Public Television.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
In the education department.
Oh, nice.
Yep. And I think some of this applies there as well, just kind of building our brand in education and getting those stories out. Most people don't even know we have an education department in Idaho Public Television. So kind of getting that word out as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, let's talk about your campaign though. What prompted you to run for office right now?
Kind of the state of things. And I have lived there for a very long time and am pretty involved in the community. I volunteer at like the school and, well, not directly in the school, but like on the stakeholders meeting, helping the schools get the resources they need. And I've been in nonprofit for a while and just see the difference that I'm really passionate about child abuse prevention, and just see the difference like all of these resources make for families, and just feel like the community as a whole could do a better job, from a local government standpoint.
Yeah. So as I'm listening to you talk about that, I'm hearing that you are really engaged, that listening matters to you, that caring for Caldwell families matters a lot to you. I'm not going to say education just because the city council, as you definitely know, doesn't really deal directly with education. So I probably, while that's great in terms of establishing your credibility and helping show that you're a qualified person to run for office, I don't know that I would lead with that because people, there's a school board that handles those matters.
Yeah,
but tell me about do you have an opponent?
I have 3.
3 opponents. Oh my gosh, are they all white men?
Yes.
Bless their hearts.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, you already have some differentiators then, so that's great.
Okay.
Do you, is one of them the incumbent?
Yes. Who's been there for 20 years.
20 plus years. Okay. So like fresh vision is always a good one for candidates that are, I think like while you're young, you also don't look like you're 20. I hope that doesn't offend you. I don't think you want to look like you're 20. I don't want to look like I'm 20. But like, I think it's good, like in terms of, especially with the work I've done with female candidates, like to think about, you want to position yourself as experienced, because one of the biases that just exist, like it or not, true or not, is that women are not as qualified as men are to run for public office. So it's always important that one of your key messages really speaks to that expertise. And I think that, having a fresh set of eyes on city government, especially in this time of like challenge after challenge after challenge, would be really compelling to voters in your area. I think that engagement is big too, because one thing I've definitely seen with incumbents is they often get a little bit lazy or maybe even entitled, and they don't necessarily feel like they need to talk to the people or email them back or, do any of those kind of good government things that are helpful. So those are 2 that come to mind, but tell me a little bit more about what are the issues specific to Caldwell? Like, I mean, I'm talking potholes, parks, like what are sort of those nuts and bolts issues that you might have? Maybe it's economic development, property taxes, like that's more of a legislature thing, but I know it's hitting local governments hard that the state hasn't really solved that problem.
Mm-hmm. We've had a lot of growth. We've got a lot of that overflow from Boise, and there are a lot of like industrial buildings going up and not any parks. Like they're parks pretty few and far between. Some of the older neighborhoods, they still lack sidewalks and street lights. So just kind of planning better for that stuff, and then conserving some of the land, the farmland that we have. We are a farming town, and but watching those farms disappear is kind of a concern.
Yeah, I think those are all great issues. I mean, generally, your campaign platform should have 3 things. You should definitely, before you establish kind of what are the key messages that will be part of your campaign platform, you should think about how your opponents are positioning themselves and what their key messages are, because you want to proactively differentiate yourself from them. And I think you'll have an easier time doing that probably than some. But if there are any of those key issues where you've had a personal experience, where you've been intimately involved, like, a lot of folks that run for city council maybe were serving on the volunteer appointed planning and zoning board beforehand or something like that. If you've served on any boards and commissions and can speak directly to some of those issues, that's always a great thing to mention. And I would just pick, is it that you want every resident of Caldwell to have a park that they can walk or bike to within 10 minutes? Like, is that your vision? Like, that's a great one, right? That's something that you could campaign on. Or is it that you want to see more equity when it comes to how sidewalks are either repaired or put in? Because I'm guessing the new, nicer neighborhoods that are coming in are better served than perhaps the ones that are closer to downtown Caldwell, although downtown Caldwell is pretty cool. If you haven't been there, you should go check it out. It's come a long way since I was at C of I. So I think those are all good things to think about. And then the other thing, Florina, right? Florina?
Yes.
to think about is, I think, are you Latina?
I am, yes.
Perfect. So I think right now is Hispanic Heritage Month, isn't it?
It is, yep.
So now would be a great time to reach out to whoever is covering local government at the Idaho Press at the moment. They've had quite a lot of turnover there, so I apologize, I don't know offhand. But if you Google Idaho Press and masthead, you can quickly find out who's covering either Canyon County or Latino affairs or how they break down those beats. Right now, it'll tell you if you do that. And I would just reach out to whoever that reporter is and just put story idea. I'm running for Caldwell City Council. I'm the only Latina in the race, which might be true. I'm not actually sure for Caldwell right now. And then I would be prepared to tell that reporter how many Latino or Latina folks have run for office in Caldwell or even been elected in Caldwell, because even though the demographics of Caldwell are quite diverse, my guess is the makeup of the city council is not. And so that could be a great differentiator and help you even expand the electorate and get people excited ahead of your race.
Yeah, I think we looked it up, and I think if I win, I would be the first.
That's awesome. So yeah, you should go after that. And you should also figure out what national groups give money to people who are the first or the only, and you should ask them for money.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a big thing.
All right, well, thank you so much, Florina. Is there anyone else? Olivia, curious to get an outside perspective on PR and government agencies versus personal lives. My role is in wildfire prevention with the U.S. Forest Service, wildfire prevention, education, investigation, fire response, and fire public information. Whew! Outside of work, co-founded a nonprofit. Yes. So this is a great one, Olivia. And in a situation where you work for the government, you might not even have like a lot of freedom to do what you want. I'm not sure what the regulations might be that kind of help inform what it is that you can do publicly in your personal life versus the government role. I think that part of it depends kind of on where you live and what stakeholders you need, unfortunately. I mean, part of the reason I do not necessarily target Idaho clients with my business, and definitely pride myself on being a remote agency that works with folks all over the country and to some extent the world, and has a team that's all over the country, is because I don't want to ever feel like I'm beholden to Idaho's political interests because they don't share my values personally. As a member of the LGBTQ community, I am very much aware that my state government doesn't believe that I should even exist. So that does not make me inclined to try to like play nice with the powers that be in Idaho. So it's different for everybody. And I think you have to define that for yourself. But definitely, like if this is your job and you need your job, I assume you do, to pay your bills and survive. I think the most important thing is to know how your employer feels about it and what you're able to do, and to try to have some alignment there so that you can protect your livelihood or figure out a way to peacefully transition to make your nonprofit your day job, if that's what you want. I hope that was helpful. So I'm going to move us along just in the interest of time, because I want to give you some time at the end to ask questions. So on this slide, I don't know how many of you have ever heard about news values, but this is really important because it's really, news values are how newsrooms make decisions. So if I send out a pitch to Channel 6 News here in the Treasure Valley, and they usually what happens is a reporter would take it to their morning pitch meeting. Usually it's at 10 a.m. and they huddle and they pitch the pitches that they've received or that they've come up with on their own that they feel like are newsworthy to their editor. And then their editor, in the case of TV news, it's often a producer or a news director. Folks weigh in and decide kind of what's going to get covered that day or to some extent that week. So news values are really important because these are things that you should bake into your pitch, that you should bake into any press release that you send out, that you really focus on when you are communicating with journalists, because it's how they do their jobs and it's how they make decisions. So news values include timeliness. So this might seem obvious, but like, if your ribbon cutting happened last week, it's no longer news, and you shouldn't send out a press release about it after the fact, or it's going to be like maybe a tiny blurb in the community section. Context is really important because you always want to provide context, which is like answering the question, why does this matter and why does this matter now? That is the question that journalists and editors are always going to be asking. And so the more you can do to answer that for them, the better off you'll be. Proximity. So how close is this to your home? So for example, with Florina running for city council in Caldwell, that is going to be mostly of interest to folks that cover Canyon County, right? It's not going to be a story in the Coeur d'Alene Press in North Idaho, right? It's going to be a story in the Valley and to the publications that focus more on the West Treasure Valley. Novelty. So how weird is it? Is it odd? We're human beings. We like stuff that's weird and interesting, right? So novelty is a big one. Celebrity or prominence is sometimes how this one is referred to, but if your news involves a public figure, a celebrity, that's a great way to ratchet up its newsworthiness in the eyes of a newsroom or a decision maker in a newsroom. Conflict. So this is the big one, right? So if it bleeds, it leads. That's often kind of the old adage that you hear in journalism school. And conflict or controversy, at the end of the day, is usually the number one news value that folks are looking for, especially in those kind of daily news outlets like newspapers and TV stations, et cetera. Less so if it's magazines sometimes, but it just really kind of depends. And then currency and relevance. So if you ever heard the term like this story has legs, like this is really going somewhere, sometimes a particular story, even a local story, can have national relevance because it kind of epitomizes a trend that's happening or really sums up something that is bigger than this unique kind of anecdote, if that makes sense. So if it feels like your story could have legs or could have repercussions in a wider venue, like I think, for example, back to Florina, the 19th newsroom would be a great one for her to check out because they are very interested. They're a woman-run and woman-led newsroom first of all. And so they're very interested in covering stories that other folks are not covering, and they're syndicated. So something that runs in the 19th could be in the Idaho Statesman, it could be in the New York Times, it could be anywhere, or it could just live on their online news site. But if they were going to do a story about standout Latinx candidates right now, they should have Florina on their radar. So something to think about. Another great way to figure out what you should be doing from a PR standpoint, especially if you're not working with an agency and are just kind of figuring out how to DIY your PR life, is look at what your competitors are doing. Everybody in business pretty much knows who their competitors are, or you should. Sometimes I call these worthy rivals, which I think is a Simon Sinek thing, but who do you kind of aspire to be like, or who are the competitors in your space, and how are they being covered in the media? How are they showing up? And sometimes that can give you your own ideas for how you want to show up and how you want to pitch yourself. So let's move into some more pitching tips. First of all, journalists are people too, especially in this day and age where everyone's talking about fake news, and journalists are often kind of demonized by people who don't necessarily understand the reality in which they are working. It's just really important to remember that they're humans and they're trying to do their job. So don't annoy them. Don't be annoying. You all know what that means. Be a good person. Part of that is like doing your homework before you pitch them, right? So just like Florina would never go to Mike Patrick at the Coeur d'Alene Press and be like, hey, I'm running for city council in Caldwell, cover this. Like that's a waste of time and that would be annoying to Mike Patrick. So Florina needs to do her homework and figure out who covers the relevant beats, or a beat is just a jargon word for topic, right, in journalism speak, and figure out how to contact the right person with the right pitch at the right time. It's also important to remember that journalists get so many press releases, and most of them are a giant waste of time and they don't ever read them. So use press releases sparingly. They can have value if you work for a bigger company, a bigger corporation, or a company that is beholden to SEC guidelines, like maybe you take venture capital. There might be reasons like legally that you even need to send out a press release, like over a wire service or something like that. But just kind of spamming like all the media that you can find through Google with a press release about your nonprofit is not the way to go about it. It's much more effective to be targeted and really laser focused on who are the folks that are actually going to care about what you're writing and cover organizations or businesses like you. Be brief. You, again, with the press releases, often they're way too long. Even pitch emails can be way too long, but mostly you just want to be able to answer the question for the reporter. Why should I cover this now? Why would a reader care about this right now? and be brief. And sometimes that means linking to a media kit or linking to a press release in like a public Google Drive folder, so they're not messing around with attachments. Don't ever email attachments. And just getting a quick yes or no. I also like to close every pitch email with thanks for considering it. I'll plan to follow up Friday if I don't hear back from you. Not always Friday, but like a couple days in the future, or a week in the future, whatever makes sense, so that you have that kind of planned follow-up to see if they're interested. Reporters tend to like email or Twitter for pitching much better than phone calls, especially if you're trying to pitch nationally. Locally and with TV, sometimes it is better to pick up the phone, but it definitely helps to have a relationship with the person that you're calling if you're doing that. Sometimes local newspaper journalists don't mind, but if you do decide to call, you should do so in the morning, because folks are often on deadline in the afternoon. And again, going back to number one, you don't want to annoy them. Other do's and don'ts. Don't misspell their name. This should be obvious, but you'd be surprised how many people, and it happens to me too, people spell Caitlin with a Y, and I'm like, come on, get my name right, especially if you want something from me, including like a free coffee to pick my brain or whatever the thing is, right? Make sure that you verify that the reporter actually covers the thing that you think they cover, their beat, either using Twitter or LinkedIn. So if Florina didn't Google who at the Idaho Press is covering Latinx affairs or Canyon County, however they assign their beat right now, and she instead just emails the education reporter, she might get a big fat no, because that is not relevant to what they're covering. Editorial calendars are really important. Editorial calendars refer to, so say you want to get a story in Rolling Stone because you are Tree Fort, right? And you think it'd be awesome to be mentioned as a must attend festival for 2022. You would want to make sure that you have the media kit or the editorial calendar for Rolling Stone, so that you know what each magazine is going to be about for far into the future, so that you can pitch the right editor well in advance. The other thing to keep in mind with editorial calendars is, like, for example, if you're a childcare or an education business, you would want to keep in mind just kind of the seasonality of folks in your target audience. So thinking about back to school season, summer camps, like what are the things that folks you're trying to reach as customers or the parents of the children who are consuming the thing? What are the dates that are kind of top of mind for them? Always customize your pitches. It's really not a good idea to just kind of spray and pray. You should always BCC your list if you do send it to more than one person. Otherwise, it can be very embarrassing and they might make fun of you on Twitter. And you should always read a lot. You should read a lot anyway, because we all want to be engaged citizens, right? We want to be plugged into our communities and try to make the world better. But this is especially important if you are pitching your business or yourself, that you know what the person has covered, what they're writing about right now, that you can respond to it, that you can give compliments, and that you can add to the conversation. And always making sure you're accurate. Again, this should be obvious, but it's not. I mean, you want to be a trusted source of information. And if you're not accurate, people aren't going to read your emails, they're not going to take you seriously, and they're not going to cover your story. So press outreach, Mike Sharp, he actually works at Boise State now, which is so sad. He was such a good journalist, but like many good journalists, we sometimes cross over into PR because we want to make a better living. And I'm guessing that was the case with Mike. But anyway, he worked at Channel 6 for a long time, and I really appreciated this compliment from him. And I think it shows that when you do these things I'm telling you to do, they work, and you'll get a good reputation for it. So let's see, it's 2:28, and I would love to hear more from folks about what you maybe have done that works, what doesn't work, and also like how your unique business is around PR or marketing capacity, because I think that can be really tricky, especially if you're a solopreneur, a coach, a consultant, or a micro business. Sometimes that can be really tough. I also just want to, like, in the spirit of normalizing delegating, like, give you permission to outsource the stuff about your job or your life that you don't enjoy. I think as women, so often we just try to do it all, and that's really like not a good way to live, in my opinion. I would rather have quality time at my job and doing my work and building my business, but then also like have quality time with my child when he's back from pre-K. And when I have that time with him, not be worried about cooking or laundry or like whatever the things are that we have to do. So I'm constantly on the hunt for ways to outsource pieces of my life. And I encourage you to do the same. When I first started my business back in 2019, I outsourced social media almost immediately because I really don't like it. But I have to do it because I'm in PR and I understand the importance of it, but it just stresses me out. So I outsourced that pretty quickly. And then I think it's also important just to have some accountability. So you don't have to do all the things, but like maybe for you, it's just actually engaging with journalists who cover your industry on Twitter. Like maybe you're just going to do that on Fridays for 1 hour or half an hour and you set a timer for that. Maybe it's you're actually ready to start pitching and you are going to commit to sending out 1 pitch a week for the next 3 months. But building up those habits, I think, can really go far. Okay, and speaking of owned media, so PR, again, is anything that impacts your business's reputation and that helps you build trust in your brand or your company. So using owned media to complement your PR strategy is really important. It's important not to do all the things, but to do the things that are going to move the needle well. So maybe you don't need to be on Snapchat, but you do need to be on Instagram. So that's fine. Lock down the Snapchat asset in case you ever need it later and to make sure no one else steals it. But then focus on Instagram because that's where your target audience is. That's where your customers are. That's where you need to show up. It's important to have a professional website. I don't think I should even have to say that anymore. But that you're consistently showing up professionally, just like you would in a storefront. Sometimes this looks like LinkedIn articles, which can also, by the way, totally be repurposed for your blog or to for individual social media posts. But all of this really matters when you are thinking about pitching reporters because ultimately they want to make sure that you're legit, especially if you're going after national press. It helps a lot to just have a consistent presence, even if it's mostly local or regional, that will just help you get national press later. And I always like to share this with folks. If you work in marketing, this probably isn't new to you. It's a marketing funnel. But I think what always is frustrating to me is when folks come to me and they're like, Caitlin, we need PR. But actually they don't have this funnel built whatsoever. And so like I could get them in Forbes or I could get them in Time Magazine or the New York Times maybe. But at the end of the day, like they don't have any way to convert that audience, right? They don't have a clear offer. They don't have a clear call to action or a way to continually engage with people who might have heard about them and thought they were really cool. And so ultimately they can't convert them into anything meaningful that moves the bottom line on their business. And that's partly why my business is actually a digital and PR agency, because I think both go hand in hand so well. But especially for online businesses, it's so important to really have this funnel baked. And so I just like to set expectations around that, because at the end of the day, like it's great to get on the Today Show or whatever the thing is, but if it breaks your website and you don't have any way to capture that attention, it ultimately doesn't serve you. So everybody wants to be here, right? These are a lot of the outlets I hear from clients where they want to show up. But I'm always reminding people not to forget about their local outlets. This is really important too. And again, not all of my clients, most of my clients are not in Idaho, but they all are based somewhere, right? They have some kind of local or regional presence where they could show up. And that's going to help so much when they're trying to go after the national press that folks want. So a lot of folks feel like maybe they're not necessarily ready to hire an agency, or they can't necessarily take that leap and hire a PR person in-house, but there are ways to get started. I've included here a link to my free PR assessment, which will help you understand if you have an obscurity problem and how you might begin to solve it. Some great questions on there to kind of help you get thinking, and who doesn't love a quiz, right? And then crisis communication is something I always end up doing, like it or not. I used to work at a public affairs firm and definitely have a soft spot for politics, but it really can suck your eyeballs out. That said, it teaches you a lot about how to navigate a crisis. And so I've come up with this content that's all about the 5 elements of a crisis communications plan. So if you want to be a hero, maybe you are the boss, or maybe you want to give this to your boss, it might be helpful in terms of navigating the next PR crisis, because there for sure will be another one. And just for you, I have put together a bundle of PR templates for those of you that are DIYers. This includes what should be in your communications plan, It's a great time as we wind down the year to start thinking about 2022, and it would be awesome for you all to feel like you have the tools to outline what your plan should look like. It helps you think through who your ideal customer is. So as you're thinking back to that story brand slide, how you would position yourself to help the character and be their guide as they walk through that journey with you. It includes a public relations checklist, because who doesn't love a checklist? Some of the do's and don'ts expanded upon what I went over with you today. Talks about how to build a media list, how to track your progress, and some of the press release guidelines and AP style information that is so important. And for you all, it's free. Just use the code Andrus, which is so exciting to say. I feel like I'm on TV or something. But yeah, I want to make sure that you all leave with some really actionable handouts that can help you in your life and in your business. So let's keep in touch. I would love to, I'm going to actually go ahead and stop sharing my screen and just invite anybody who wants to. I would love to hear what you've struggled with, what's worked, if you have any PR challenges or anything that I said resonated or maybe didn't make as much sense and you want me to expand it a little bit more, I'm happy to do so right now. Great point from Jim. Yes, your job is to make reporters and journalists' life easier. That is so true. And I will tell you that when you get the New York Times to come to Boise, Idaho, which I've done twice now, it is very important that you make their life easy. I felt like I was part travel guide, part like, I don't know, handler. It was definitely like unbelievable to see how the New York Times works versus how incredibly competent our local journalists are. So shout out to the local journalists because they do a great job, and it's interesting to see how much hand-holding sometimes the national press needs. One, putting out fires. So that was a fun story because we had our team retreat in McCall this year, and we actually got the McCall Fire Department, bless their hearts, to let me like start a fire and have my team put it out and take photos doing it. And it kind of was exceptionally fun because we had done some big crisis projects in the past year, and it felt like I don't know, it was like a catalyst to just actually put out a literal fire after putting out metaphorical fires for a while for work. All right. Was it a dumpster fire? That is such a good question. And that is actually what I wanted, but they wouldn't let us do a dumpster. They had a smaller kind of scenario for us, but it was really fun. It was kind of like, they kind of said it's almost like a glorified burner, but it's like on the ground and it's bigger than a burner, and then they lit those on fire, let us put them out.
Caitlin, we had a question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
You covered. What did you wish you knew when you started?
Gosh, well, I started out as a journalist. I think in terms of when I started my business, I wish I would have known that it's really not as hard as everyone says it is. And that you don't necessarily have to wait until you feel qualified, which I think is a mistake women make all the time. For me, I started my business when I was 35, and it was nice to be like old enough that you weren't like the youngest person in the room anymore, which I had definitely been in past careers, but young enough that you're still kind of like hip and cool or whatever. I don't know if that's true, but that's how I felt at the time. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I just felt like I had always been a really hard worker and worked really hard to make, previous bosses successful. And it was just time to do it on my terms and do it for myself. And I would love to see more women do that, because I think that's how we change what capitalism looks like. And it's how we change what politics looks like. So just do it. There's so many resources out there. Our business coach is actually this amazing woman named Rachel Rogers, and her company is called Hello 7, and her passion is helping women-owned businesses scale to 7 figures and multiple 7 figures. So it's great. She's a great resource, and she works with business owners at all levels, even if you're just starting out or have a side hustle. And she particularly likes working with BIPOC and LGBTQ founders.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much, Caitlin, for presenting and sharing it with us.
Glad to do it. And go be women leaders. We need you. Idaho needs you, and all the other places too.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much, Caitlin, for presenting and sharing it with us.
Glad to do it. And go be women leaders. We need you. Idaho needs you, and all the other places too.